The scream tore through the howling wind and slashing rain, a raw sound of defiance that stopped Kalen Stoneclaw in his tracks. A century of ruling the frozen northern reaches had taught him the language of screams. This was not fear. This was not pain. This was fury, given a voice, and it clawed at something deep and dormant within his chest. It came from the east, from the place his people called the Whispering Woods, council territory, not his concern. His laws of neutrality, carved from the ashes of an old betrayal, were clear. Do not interfere. Let the Council of Crows govern their own justice, however dark it might be. But that sound, it echoed, it lingered. It felt like a key turning in a lock he'd sealed shut 100 years ago. Driven by a compulsion he could not name, Kalen moved. He was a shadow against the storm, his massive form blurring through the pines, his violet eyes cutting through the gloom. He reached the tree line in moments, the scent of torch smoke and fear cutting through the petrichor. What he saw was a ceremony of cruelty. A circle of flaming brands held by pack guards, their faces grim. A robed seer, her voice cold and chanting, and in the center, a young woman being forced to her knees in the mud. Her hair was dark as a raven's wing, plastered to her face by the rain. But her eyes, even from this distance, Kalen saw them, silver, like molten moonlight trapped in a storm. The seer's declaration was a death sentence dressed in ritual. A trial of purity, let the woods judge what the council cannot. But Kalen saw the truth etched in the twisted runes carved into the earth. This was no trial, this was a sacrifice, a feeding. He watched, a silent king in the shadows, as the woman's gaze swept the circle. It landed on a broad-shouldered man who stared stubbornly at the ground. Elian, her voice was a broken thread, barely audible over the wind. The man flinched but did not look. Then her eyes found a smaller woman huddled beside him. Mira! The name was a plea, her bond sister. The woman named Mira turned her face away, shoulders hunched as if against a physical blow. That was the moment Kalen saw her understanding solidify. It wasn't just condemnation, it was absolute betrayal. By her mate, by her sister, by her entire world. The circle of fire roared to life, sealing her inside. The guards stepped back as if she carried a plague. Walk, the seer commanded. Let the forest decide your worth. For a heartbeat, the woman stood frozen, a solitary figure in a cage of flame, rain and blood mingling on her skin. Then she did something that stole the breath from Kalen's lungs. She lifted her chin, and she laughed. A bitter, shattered sound that held more power than any scream. You're not testing me. You're just too cowardly to wield the knife yourselves, so you let the woods do it. She turned her back on them all, on Elian, on Mira, on the seer and the guards and the life that had rejected her. And with a spine of steel, she walked straight into the heart of the Whispering Woods, the darkness swallowing her whole. The pack dispersed quickly, guilt and fear hastening their steps. The flames guttered and died. The runes faded. And Kalen Stoneclaw, the neutral king, stood alone in the downpour. He should leave. This was the epitome of not his concern. To cross that border was to declare war on a century of careful peace. But that laugh, that defiant, broken laugh echoed the one in his own memory, from a time when trust was a weapon that had been used against him. And as she vanished, he had felt it, a deep, resonant thrum in the air, in his very blood, a recognition, a calling. He had felt it only once before, with a woman who wore a silver crown and a silver lie. It was the sign of ancient power meeting ancient power, elder blood. Why was a woman with the oldest, purest lineage of their kind being thrown like refuse into an execution forest? His wolf, silent and cold for decades, growled deep within him. Investigate. No. With a curse that was lost to the wind, Kaelin Stoneclaw took a single, decisive step across the boundary into council land. The forest, ancient and watchful, groaned as he passed. He was a ghost among the trees, his senses stretching, following that faint, resonant pull like a lodestone. He found her an hour later, by a swollen, black stream. She was on her knees, trying to wash the blood from her temple with trembling hands. Bruises painted her arms. Her breathing was shallow, pained, but she was alive, and she was not alone. Shadows detached from the deeper darkness around her. Glowing eyes circled, forest predators drawn by the scent of wounded prey. Kaelin tensed, ready to intervene. But the woman did not scream. She did not cry. Slowly, painfully, she began to hum. A melody old as the mountains, a lullaby his own grandmother had sung, a song of comfort and calm, offered to the darkness that sought to devour her. The creatures paused, confused by this strange singing prey. It was the most courageous thing Kaelin had seen in 100 years. He moved then, a ripple of dominant power flooding the clearing. The predators scattered. The woman's head snapped up, her silver eyes locking with his violet ones across the space. And the resonance slammed into him, a physical force that made his vision swim. Power, vast, deep, and chained, writhed beneath her skin. She tried to stand, to put distance between them, but collapsed with a gasp of pain. "Who are you?" she rasped, one arm wrapped around her ribs. Kaelin approached slowly, noting the wariness in her eyes, the expectation of more violence. "Someone who wishes to understand," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Why a woman with elder blood in her veins walks willingly into a grave." Her eyes widened. "You felt it?" "Yes, and so you know what I am." Her laugh was a hollow, broken thing. "An alpha king who breaks his own laws." Kaelin knelt before her, ignoring her flinch. He didn't touch her, but he could feel the wrongness emanating from her, a sickness woven into her spirit. Suppression, years of it, layer upon layer, like poison in the roots of a great tree. "Who did this to you?" The question was a barely whisper. Her silver eyes, so bright with defiance moments before, glazed with pain that had nothing to do with her wounds. "Everyone," she breathed. "My pack, the elders, my mate.
Are not
They said my
disappearing
eyes
tonight,"
were a
he
curse,
said,
that my
his
very
voice
presence
leaving no
broke
room
the
for argument.
wardstones,
He
that the
gathered
world
her
was
into his
safer with
arms,
me
shockingly gently.
asleep."
She was
Her
light,
eyelids fluttered,
a bundle of
exhaustion
shattered
pulling her
bones and
down.
stifled thunder.
"They just wanted me to
Because
be
if
quiet,
someone went
to
to such
disappear."
lengths to silence
Kaelin
you,
looked at this
he murmured,
broken,
more to
magnificent
himself than to
creature.
her.
She
"You
carried the
must have a
legacy of
voice worth
kings and
hearing."
queens, and
Her
they had
head
tried to
lolled
turn her
against his
into a
shoulder.
ghost.
Through
For the
blood-matted
second time
hair,
that
her
night,
silver
he made a
gaze found
decision
his,
that would shatter
clouded
his
with
world.
confusion and a flicker of something like desperate hope. "I want to hear it," Kaelin said, turning his back on the whispering woods and carrying her toward his kingdom. "I want to hear what you have to say when you finally wake up." She lost consciousness then, a final sigh escaping her lips. Kaelin Stoneclaw, the neutral king, carried a condemned woman across his border, her name unknown, her power dormant, and her destiny irrevocably tangled with his. And far behind, in the empty circle of scarred earth, a single crow took flight, its message already forming. The king has taken the sacrifice. The storm is coming. The border keep was a secret carved into the mountain's heart, a place of stone and silence where Kaelin Stoneclaw went when the weight of the crown became a physical ache. He laid the unconscious woman on a bed of furs before the hearth, the firelight dancing over her pale, bruised skin. He worked with a quiet, focused intensity. He cleaned the blood from her face, revealing sharp cheekbones and a stubborn set to her jaw, even in sleep. The physical wounds were manageable, but the other wounds? His gaze fixed on the markings on her collarbone, her wrists. Suppression runes. They pulsed with a sickly greenish light, not just on her skin, but beneath it, woven through her energy like thorny vines around a sapling. They were old, they were deep, and they were killing her as surely as the forest predators would have. Each rune was a lie carved into her flesh. Be less, be small, be silent. As he stoked the fire, a memory, sharp and unwelcome, pierced his calm. Seraphina, her face, beautiful and cold, her own silver eyes, a paler, weaker echo of the woman before him, filled with ambition instead of fear. She too had carried the old blood. She too had made promises in the dark, and she traded his heart, his family, his entire lineage to the council for a throne of her own. The betrayal had frozen something in him. Neutrality was not just policy, it was armor. Yet here he was, breaking that armor for a stranger. A soft moan pulled him from the past. Her eyelids fluttered. Silver eyes, clouded with pain and disorientation, focused on the stone ceiling, then swept the room. She moved in a sudden burst of panic, scrambling back against the wall, her breath coming in sharp, pained gasps. Where is this? Her voice was a dry leaf rustling. You are safe, Kalen said, staying where he was, not wanting to loom over her. You are in the northern reaches, beyond the council's reach. Her eyes, wide and wary, found his. Safe is an illusion. The crows have long claws. Not here, he held her gaze. This land answers to me. My name is Kalen Stoneclaw. Recognition, then disbelief. The neutral king. The title sounded like an accusation. You don't interfere. Everyone knows this. I didn't, corrected Kalen softly. Usually. Why? The word was sharp, desperate. Why break a century of peace for me? Kalen considered his answer. He could not speak of the resonance yet, that terrifying pull, not to this frightened, wounded creature. Because you did not beg, he said finally. In that circle, with fire at your back and betrayal in your heart, you laughed, you walked. I have seen warriors with less courage. Her defiance seemed to crumble, leaving exhaustion in its wake. She looked down at her scarred wrists, her fingers tracing the runes unconsciously. Courage? She gave a hollow laugh. They called it corruption. My own power? They made it a sickness to be cured. These, she gestured weakly at the marks, are the medicine. For 13 years, since I was a child. A cold fury settled in Kalen's gut. 13 years of systematic silencing? Your pack allowed this? My pack demanded it. She closed her eyes, a single tear tracing a path through the dirt on her cheek. The council told them I was a threat, an anomaly from a bloodline that should have ended. They were afraid, so they helped build my cage. She began to hum then, that same haunting lullaby from the woods, a fragile sound in the stone room. You hum when you are afraid, Kalen observed, not unkindly. She stopped, startled. It's an old song, my grandmother's, before they took her away too. My grandmother sang the same one, Kalen admitted, and something in his admission softened the air between them. Silence stretched, filled only by the crackle of the fire. The woman, he realized he did not even know her name, pulled the furs closer. You said you wanted to hear my voice. What if I don't know what it sounds like anymore? What if they succeeded and there's nothing left? Kalen leaned forward, his violet eyes intense. The forest did not take you. The predators hesitated. I felt your power, even buried under a mountain of their fear. They did not succeed. They only made you angry. For the first time, a spark ignited in her silver eyes, cutting through the pain and despair. Not hope, not yet, but a flicker of rightful, kindling rage. Angry, she repeated, tasting the word. Before Kalen could respond, his head snapped up. His entire body went taut, his senses flaring out beyond the stone walls. The shift was subtle, a change in the wind's whisper, a distant tremor in the connection he held with his land. What is it? she whispered, sensing the change in him. Kalen arose to his feet, a low growl building in his chest. Someone has crossed my border. Hunters. Council hunters. Her face paled further. They followed us. No. Kalen's voice was like grinding stone. They were already coming. This was always the plan. The forest was never meant to be your end. It was to be your prison while they prepared the true execution. He moved to a heavy wooden chest, pulling out weapons of dark, rune-etched steel. The king was gone, replaced by the warrior, the protector. "We must run," she said, trying to stand. "I do not run." Kalen turned to her, and the absolute certainty in his gaze was more imposing than any shout. "I told you, this land answers to me, and tonight it is angry too." Outside, in the moonless dark, shadows moved with lethal intent toward the hidden keep. The hunt had arrived not for prey, but for a king who had stolen their prize. And inside, the woman with the silenced blood and the silver eyes felt the first true, unadulterated emotion break through the numbness. Not just fear, but a fierce protective urge for this stranger who had broken his peace for her. The runes on her skin gave a sudden, painful throb. The fight was coming, and the ghost in the keep was about to remember she was a queen. The hunters breached the keep not with a crash, but with a silence-oiled precision. 7 of them, masks of black leather and crow feathers obscuring their faces, filled the small main chamber. They moved as one entity, surrounding Kalen and the woman on the bed. The lead hunter stepped forward, his voice a modulated rasp behind his mask. "King Stoneclaw, you have something that belongs to the council. Step aside. This need not concern you further." Kalen stood between them and the fur bed, a statue of contained violence. He had not shifted, but the air around him thickened, charged with dominance. "Everything in this keep concerns me. You are in my home, uninvited. The girl is a condemned criminal, tainted. Her execution is council law. Your law ends at my border." Kalen's voice dropped, deadly soft. "What you call taintment, I call betrayed." A flicker of uncertainty passed through the hunters. Challenging an alpha king on his own land was suicide. They had hoped his neutrality would hold. It was a miscalculation. Then one of the smaller hunters at the back removed their mask. Blonde hair spilled out, tied in practical braids. Eyes the color of sunlit amber met the silver eyes of the woman on the bed. "Hello, Lyra," the hunter said. The name hung in the air. Lyra. Kalen stored it away, a piece of the puzzle. The woman, Lyra, stiffened as if struck, all the color drained from her face. "Mira." The name was a breath, a wound. "You should have stayed in the woods, Lyra," Mira said, her voice struggling to remain flat, official. "It would have been quicker, kinder." "Kinder?" Lyra's whisper cracked. "You stood there. You watched them push me into the fire. You were my sister." "I am protecting you." Mira's composure broke, revealing a desperate, twisted fervor. "From yourself. Don't you see? The power inside you. It's wrong, Lyra. It's a sickness. The elders showed me the records of what your bloodline did, the chaos. I'm saving you from becoming a monster." Lyra stared, and Kalen saw the moment the last fragile thread of her old life snapped. The pain in her eyes hardened into something cold and clear. "You are not saving me," Lyra said, her voice gaining a strange, solid strength. "You are murdering me because you are afraid, and you are dressing it up as love so you can sleep at night." Mira flinched as if slapped. The lead hunter regained control. "Enough. King Stoneclaw, final warning. Hand her over." Kalen smiled. It was a terrifying sight. "No." He moved. It was not the controlled shift of a formal challenge. It was an explosion. 1 second he was a man, the next a creature of myth filled the space. 8 feet of primal alpha, fur dark as a midnight storm, eyes blazing like violet suns. His roar was not sound, but force, a wave that slammed the hunters back against the walls. He didn't kill them, he made examples. The first hunter who lunged found his sword shattered by a swipe of a clawed hand, and he was thrown through the open door into the night. The second was disarmed, pinned to the floor with a massive paw on his chest, the message in Kalen's growl clear: run. They ran, scrambling, stumbling, their professional detachment shattered by the raw, unleashed power of a true Alpha King. Only Mira remained, frozen, staring up at the colossal being between her and Lyra. Kalen shifted back, the transformation smoother this time. He stood, breathing deeply, the vestiges of power still crackling around him. He looked at Mira, then at Lyra. She is yours to judge. Lyra pushed herself upright, every movement pain-filled but deliberate. She walked to where Mira knelt. She looked down at the face of her bond sister, the girl who had shared secrets and dreams and blood oaths. You chose them, Lyra said. No anger left, only a profound, weary sadness. You chose their fear over our oath, so I choose to release you from it. She reached out, not to strike, but to touch Mira's forehead with 2 fingers. A faint, silvery spark, the barest whisper of her suppressed power, jumped between them. It was not an attack, it was a severing. Mira gasped, feeling the ancient bond-sister link, the one she had betrayed, snap and dissolve into nothing. Go back to your council, Mira, Lyra said, turning away. Tell them I am dead. It will be easier for you. Mira stumbled to her feet, her face a mask of grief and confusion. She looked from Lyra's back to Kalen's impassive face, then fled into the darkness after the others. The keep was silent again, the only sound Lyra's ragged breathing and the pop of the fire. Kalen watched her. She didn't cry. She stood in the center of the room, trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline, staring at her own hands as if seeing them for the first time. You showed mercy, Kalen said. I showed indifference, Lyra corrected, her voice hollow. The bond is dead. She is a stranger now. She finally looked at him, her silver eyes glistening. They will return, with an army. Let them. Kalen walked to the hearth, pulling a small, ancient-looking book bound in worn leather from a niche in the stone. He opened it, pages crackling, to a lineage chart filled with elegant, archaic runes. His finger traced down, through names forgotten by the world, to a symbol that glittered with faint embedded silver dust, a crescent moon entwined with a wolf. Your eyes, the resonance, the way the forest reacted, Kalen murmured, his own voice tinged with awe. He looked up at her. You are not just elder blood, Lyra. You are first blood, descendant of the primordial alphas, the ones who walked with the moon itself, the line the council purged 3 centuries ago. Lyra shook her head slowly. That's a legend, a ghost story.
It is your story, Kalen said, his gaze unwavering. The silver eyes are the mark. The power they suppressed. It wasn't just strength, Lyra. It was sovereignty. First blood doesn't just lead packs. It can command them. It can reshape the very magic of our world. The council didn't just fear you. They feared the truth you carried in your veins, that their power is a stolen, fragile thing. The weight of his words pressed down on her. The humiliation, the loneliness, the years of being told she was less, it all recontextualized with brutal clarity. It wasn't about a flaw in her, it was about a threat she represented to a corrupt system. The runes on her collarbones seared with a sudden sharp pain. A hairline crack of silver light appeared in one of them. She gasped, clutching her chest. The air in the room grew heavy, charged. Kalen was at her side in an instant. Breathe. Do not fight it. It's trying to break free. I don't know how, she cried, panic rising as the power, vast and unfamiliar, stirred like a waking giant within her. You don't need to know, he said firmly, his hands on her shoulders, grounding her. Just let it know you are not afraid anymore.
Lyra looked into his violet eyes, seeing not fear of her power, but a fierce encouragement. She stopped fighting. She stopped trying to be small. A silent shock wave emanated from her. No fire, no light, but a profound, deep silence that made the flames in the hearth dip. For 1 second, Kaelin felt the true shape of her spirit, an immense, radiant, and merciful force that had been forced into a box for years. Then it receded, the runes sealing over, but weaker now. The crack remained. Lyra sagged against him, utterly spent. What was that? Kaelin held her steady, his own heart pounding. That, he said, reverence in his tone, was the echo of a queen. Outside, the forest sighed. Deep in the earth, ancient wardstones, dormant for centuries, hummed to life. The ghost was gone. The awakening had begun. The silence after the hunter's retreat was deceptive. Kaelin knew it was the calm before the storm. He spent the next 2 days reinforcing the keep's hidden wards, his magic weaving with the mountain's own bones to create a shield that would scream at the slightest hostile touch. Lyra rested, her body healing faster than expected, as if her awakening spirit spurred her physical form. She moved through the keep with a new quietness, not of fear, but of deep, unsettling thought. She watched Kaelin work, absorbing the reality of his world, a king who was also a soldier, a ruler who touched the earth's magic with a familiarity that spoke of true stewardship, not just dominion. On the 3rd morning, she found him studying a large weathered map, etched on cured leather, spread across the stone table. Territories were marked with different symbols: the northern reaches under a stylized mountain, the council's central dominion under a crow, and various packlands surrounding them. "They will come from the southeast," Kaelin said without looking up, his finger tracing a path through a mountain pass. "The fastest route for an army. They will try to flank us, using the Black River Gorge." Lyra stepped closer, looking at the map. It was the first time she'd seen the world laid out so clearly, beyond the confines of her small, fearful pack's territory. "You speak of armies, for one woman." "Not for a woman," Kaelin corrected, finally meeting her gaze. "You are living proof that their foundation is a lie. They cannot allow that proof to breathe. They will burn this entire mountain to ash to erase you." The weight of his words should have terrified her. Instead, it ignited a cold, clear purpose. "Then we cannot let them." "We?" Kaelin raised an eyebrow. "You broke your oath. I am the cause. This is my fight as much as yours. I may not know how to wield this first blood, but I am not helpless. I know the council's tactics. I know how they think, in secrets, in lies, in turning hearts against each other." Kaelin saw the steel in her. The victim was gone, replaced by a strategist. "What do you suggest?" "They expect a siege, a grand, bloody last stand here at the keep, so we don't give it to them." She pointed to the map, to a symbol deep within the whispering woods. "What is this?" Kaelin's eyes darkened. "The Heartwood, the oldest part of the forest. It is alive with ancient magic. Even the council's hunters avoid it. It is unstable, wild." "A place of power," Lyra murmured, her silver eyes seeing something he could not. "A place where their laws, their certainty, might not hold, where an old magic might recognize a new one. It is also a trap. The magic there does not distinguish between friend or foe. It consumes." "Not if it is called by its rightful guardian," Lyra murmured, more to herself than him. She looked up, resolute, hardening her features. "We need to draw them away from your people, away from any innocent packs. We lead them into the Heartwood. Let the forest itself be our ally." It was a daring, dangerous plan, almost suicidal, but Kaelin saw the logic in it. A defensive war would devastate the borderlands. An offensive trap in neutral, treacherous territory, it might just work. "We would need to be bait," Kaelin said. I am bait, Lyra replied simply. They want me. We let them think they are hunting a wounded, fleeing girl and a renegade king. We lead them on a chase right into the teeth of the oldest thing in this land. A slow, grim smile touched Kalen's lips. For the first time in a century, he was not just defending, he was planning an attack, with a queen by his side. Then we must prepare for a journey, and you, Kalen said firmly, turning fully to her, must learn to listen to the forest. It has already chosen you. Now you must learn to speak back. He began gathering supplies, light packs, water skins, packets of dried meat and healing herbs. As he worked, Lyra stood before the small, high window, looking out at the towering pines. Kalen, she said softly. He stopped, listening. Thank you for not being afraid of me. He walked over to stand beside her. I told you, I felt what they buried in you. It is not something to fear. It is something to respect, something the world has been missing. Their shoulders didn't touch, but a current of understanding flowed between them, stronger than any physical contact. It was the bond of allies, of two people who had seen the worst of their world and decided to remake it. Later that day, as Lyra practiced focusing her senses, feeling the sap rise in the distant trees, the heartbeat of a fox in its den, the newly set ward on the eastern ridge shrieked a silent alarm in Kalen's mind. He was at the window in an instant. Not hunters this time. A single, cloaked figure stood at the edge of the clearing, hood pulled low. They held no weapon, made no aggressive move. They simply waited. A messenger, Kalen growled. Or a trap, Lyra said, coming to his side. Stay here. Kalen shifted partially, claws extending as he strode out of the keep. The figure did not move as he approached. When Kalen was 10 paces away, the figure spoke, the voice old and dry as autumn leaves. The council sends words, Stoneclaw. I care little for the council's words. These you will care for. The messenger lifted a gnarled hand, and a shimmering, ghostly image appeared in the air between them. It showed a peaceful valley dotted with stone homes, a small, independent pack that lived on the very edge of Kalen's territory, the Sunfall Pack. Good people, neutral like he had been. The image changed. It showed crow-feathered soldiers surrounding the valley, torches in hand. The Sunfall Pack thrives on your border. Their safety has always been under your unspoken protection, a testament to your neutral strength. The image of the torches lifted. Hand over the First Blood abomination by dawn tomorrow, or watch the Sunfall Pack be cleansed from the world. Their blood will be on your hands, King, not the Council's. The image vanished. The messenger bowed slightly and began to melt back into the trees. Kalen's rage was a cold, silent thing that froze the very air. This was the Council's true face, not a challenge to his strength, but an attack on his conscience. They would slaughter innocents to force his hand, to make him choose between protecting one and saving many. He returned to the keep, his face a mask of stormy fury. He told Lyra what he had seen. Her reaction was not what he expected. She didn't wilt with guilt. Her silver eyes turned to ice. They reveal their weakness, she said, her voice low and sharp. They know they cannot defeat you in fair combat, so they use cruelty as a weapon. They think it will break you. It must not. We stick to the plan, but we accelerate it. They will burn that valley, Lyra, said Kalen, the weight of the threat crushing. Not if the prize they want is dangling right before them, she countered. We don't wait for dawn. We leave tonight. We make it look like we are fleeing toward the Sunfall Valley, then veer sharply into the Whispering Woods. We make it look like we are trying to reach the pack, to protect them. Their army will follow us, not stop to besiege a valley. We lead them away. We draw their fire. It was a gamble, a huge one. It relied on the Council's greed and bloodlust, outweighing their tactical sense. Kalen looked at this woman who days ago had been kneeling in a circle of fire. Now she was commanding strategy, thinking of saving people she'd never met. He saw the first blood in her then, not as power, but as responsibility. "We move at moonrise," Kalen said, his decision made. The council had thrown a shadow over the innocent. They thought it would paralyze him. They didn't realize they had just given the awakening queen a cause to fight for, and the neutral king a reason to become something else entirely. The Avenger was coming, and he was bringing a storm. The moon was a sliver of cold silver, offering little light, as Kalen and Lyra slipped from the keep. They traveled light and fast, two shadows against the deeper black of the pines. Kalen led, his senses stretched to their limits, mapping the presence of every owl, every deer, every unnatural stillness that spoke of hidden watchers. They found the first scout an hour into their journey, a crow soldier, perched high in a fir, his eyes scanning the trails. Kalen gave a low, almost inaudible growl. Lyra, following his lead, let a tiny wisp of her suppressed power leak out, a deliberate, controlled flicker like a dying ember, enough to be felt by a sensitive tracker, a breadcrumb of panic. The scout's head snapped in their direction. He didn't see them, but he felt her. He signaled silently to the darkness, and Kalen sensed the subtle shift as the net of hunters began to tighten, not on the keep, but on their fleeing prey. Good, he thought. Follow. They altered their path, angling visibly toward the southeast, directly toward the Sunfall Valley. They crashed through a stream, leaving obvious prints. Lyra snapped a branch loudly. They were no longer ghosts. They were a panicked, fleeing duo, leaving a trail a child could follow. Just before dawn, with the first gray light bleeding into the sky, they crested a ridge. Below, serene in the valley's embrace, lay the stone houses of the Sunfall Pack, smoke beginning to rise from morning hearths. And on the opposite ridge, a line of dark shapes was assembling, the council's vanguard. "Now," Kalen whispered. Instead of descending toward the village, they turned sharply west, plunging headlong into the thickest, oldest part of the Whispering Woods. They used their full speed now, Kalen half carrying Lyra over rough terrain. The message was clear. "We tried to reach them, but you cut us off. Now we run for the deep woods." A howl of triumph and command echoed behind them. The dark shapes on the ridge surged forward, not towards the village, but after them. The bait had been taken. The Sunfall Valley was forgotten. The true prize was on the run.
The Whispering Woods lived up to its name. As they delved deeper, the very air seemed to murmur. Leaves rustled with no wind. Twigs snapped in the distance, out of rhythm with their pursuers' steps. The light grew dim, filtered through a dense, tangled canopy that felt more like a roof than trees. Lyra began to struggle. It wasn't fatigue. The deeper they went, the more the suppression runes on her skin burned and itched. But alongside the pain came a pull, a song only she could hear, humming up from the roots beneath her feet. "Kalen," she gasped, stopping to lean against a moss-covered boulder. "The forest, it's not just alive, it's awake, and it's sad, angry." Kalen listened, but his senses were tuned to the physical. He heard the distant shouts of the hunters, the crash of their pursuit. "Can you speak to it, as you planned?" Lyra closed her eyes, pressing her palms against the cold, damp moss. She didn't try to push her power. She tried to listen, to open the door they had kept locked for 13 years. Images flooded her, not through sight, but through feeling. She felt the ancient peace of this place, a sacred grove for millennia. Then the sharp, painful intrusion of the council's first suppression runes carved into the oldest trees to break the forest's will. She felt the agony of the woods as it was twisted into a place of judgment and death. The Heartwood had become a prison for the forest spirit, just as her body had been a prison for hers. Tears streamed down her face, not for herself, but for the grove. She understood, she whispered to the earth. "I am a prisoner too." The murmuring around them softened. The hostile, watchful feeling eased slightly, replaced by a tentative curiosity. "They're closing in," Kalen said, his voice tense. "We need to reach the Heartwood clearing." Lyra opened her eyes, her silver gaze glowing faintly in the gloom. "It knows we're here. It knows what follows us. It will not make this easy. The path will try to lose us." As on cue, the familiar trail they'd been following seemed to shift. A wall of thorny brush appeared where none had been. The landmarks Kalen had memorized from old tales were gone. "We don't find the Heartwood," Lyra said, standing straighter, the pain in her runes fading before a rising sense of purpose. "We ask it to find us." She began to walk, not following a path, but following the humming in her blood. She led Kalen through impossible thickets that seemed to part for her, across streams that appeared just as they needed to cross, and under arches of gnarled roots that looked centuries old. Kalen followed, trusting her completely. He fought the instinct to take charge, to rely on his maps and his strength. This was her domain now, the magic of blood and earth. Finally, they burst into a clearing, but it was not the sanctuary they hoped for. The Heartwood was a circle of colossal, silver-barked trees, their branches woven together high above to form a perfect cathedral-like dome. In the center was a pool of water so still and black it looked like a hole in the world. But the ground was scorched. Ancient, corrupted runes, mirrors of the ones on Lyra's skin, carved into the tree trunks, pulsing with a sickly green light. This was the source, the place where the council had first poisoned the forest. And standing between them and the pool was not the council army, but a single figure, the seer, the same one who had condemned Lyra. Her white robes were pristine amidst the decay. She smiled, a cold, empty thing. "You led them a merry chase, little bird, but you flew right to the gilded cage." She spread her arms. "This is where your bloodline ends, where the forest's rebellion ends. The final suppression will be carved here, into the very heart of the world, and your king will watch before he joins you." From the shadows of the great trees, the crow hunters emerged. Not dozens, but hundreds. They had not been fooled by the chase. They had been herded. The trap was not theirs for the council. It was the council's trap for them. Kalen shifted fully, the magnificent, terrifying alpha wolf standing protectively before Lyra, a growl shaking the very leaves. They were surrounded, outnumbered 100 to 1, in the place of their enemy's greatest power. Lyra looked from the seer's triumphant face to the corrupted runes to the black pool. The humming in her blood rose to a deafening crescendo, not of fear, but of pure, clarion anger. This was the heart of the sickness. This was where the lie began. She stepped forward, placing a hand on Kalen's mighty furred shoulder. She didn't look at the army. She looked at the seer, and her voice, when it came, was clear and carried the weight of the ancient trees. "You are wrong, seer," she said, and the silver in her eyes began to bleed into light. "This is where we begin." She raised her hands not in attack, but in appeal, to the trees, to the water, to the wounded earth beneath the corruption. "This," she declared, as the first crack split across every suppression rune on her body, unleashing a torrent of silver light. The Heartwood, held in chains for centuries, finally had its key, and it was time to break the lock. Silver light erupted from Lyra, not as an explosion, but as a wave. It washed over the clearing, gentle as moonlight, yet inexorable as the tide. It did not strike the seer or the hunters. It touched the corrupted runes carved into the ancient silver-barked trees. Where the sickly green light met Lyra Silver, a silent battle raged. The green pulsed, fighting to maintain its hold, its poison. But Lyra's power was not an attack. It was a memory. It was the echo of what the forest was meant to be, whole,
free, sacred. A low ground shuddered through the earth. The trees themselves began to tremble. The black pool at the center of the clearing rippled, not from the surface, but from the depths. The seer's triumphant smile vanished, replaced by a snarl of disbelief. You cannot. The bindings are centuries old. They are woven into the very roots. They are a lie, Lyra said, her voice layered with that strange harmonic power. She took another step forward, the light from her body streaming into the ground like liquid starlight. They are lies, and this forest remembers the truth. Kalen stood as her bulwark, his violet eyes scanning the circle of hunters. They were faltering, not from fear of him, but from the unsettling transformation of the place they had been taught to control. The very air was getting heavier, thicker with the scent of ozone and blooming night flowers. With a sound like tearing parchment, the first of the corrupted runes shattered. A pulse of pure, clean energy burst from the tree, and the great silver bark seemed to sigh, its branches reaching higher as if shaking off a weight. Then another rune broke, and another. The seer shrieked in rage and fear, "Stop her! Kill her now!" The command broke the hunter's stupor. They surged forward, weapons drawn. Kalen met them, a whirlwind of fang and claw. He was a force of nature, a king defending his queen, and he fought with a ferocity that made the air hum. He did not kill unless he had to, breaking arms, disarming, using his sheer dominance to force them back. He was the wall, and they broke against him.
But there were too many. A blade grazed his flank. A weighted net flew toward Lyra. Lyra did not flinch. Her entire being was focused on the song of the heartwood. She saw its pain, its long captivity, and she poured her own understanding into it. The feeling of being small, of being bound, of being told you are wrong for simply existing. "I see you," she whispered to the forest. "You are not wrong. You are not evil. You were stolen. Let me help you remember." The black pool in the center of the clearing began to glow from within, not with green light, but with a soft silver-blue radiance, like moonlight on water. The light traveled up through the roots into the trees, racing along the pathways the corruption had used. The final largest rune, carved into the oldest tree directly behind the seer, blazed with violent green light, fighting to hold. The seer pressed her hands against it, chanting, pouring her own twisted magic into the seal. Lyra felt the strain. The rune was the keystone. Breaking it would free the heartwood completely, but the backlash could be immense. She was new to this power, untrained. It could consume her. She met Kalen's gaze across the clearing. He had just thrown 2 hunters aside. He was bleeding, but his eyes were clear, locked on hers. He gave a single sharp nod. "Trust yourself." Lyra took a deep breath. She stopped fighting the power, stopped trying to direct it. She simply let it be. She opened the last door in her soul and let the first blood, the birthright she had never known, flow out. She wasn't just Lyra, the rejected girl. She was Lyra of the first dawn, daughter of the primordial pact between wolf and wood. She raised her hands high, and the silver light coalesced into a single brilliant beam that lanced across the clearing and struck the keystone rune. There was no sound, yet everyone felt it, a deep foundational crack. The green light shattered into a million fading embers. The ancient tree shuddered, and from its bark, where the rune had been, fresh living wood began to grow, covering the scar. A wave of pure, undiluted life exploded from the heartwood. It was a silent roar of liberation. The very ground blossomed underfoot, white starflowers and silver moss erupting from the scorched earth. The corrupted runes vanished, replaced by tracings of natural, glowing lichen. The air cleared, the oppressive murmurs replaced by a clear, high humming, a song of joy. The effect on the council's forces was immediate and total.
Their connection to the corrupted magic was severed. The seer screamed, clutching her head as if the breaking rune had been inside her own mind. The hunters dropped their weapons, stumbling back, disoriented and suddenly vulnerable. The forest they had used as a weapon no longer recognized their authority. In fact, the trees seemed to lean in, watching them with a new, intelligent hostility. Kalen used the moment. He shifted back to his human form, breathing heavily. "The forest is free," he announced, his voice carrying. "Your power here is broken. Leave, now, and tell your council that the Heartwood has a guardian once more." The seer, broken and furious, was dragged away by her retreating soldiers. They fled into the woods, which now seemed to twist and close paths behind them, eager to be rid of them. Silence descended, but it was a different silence, peaceful, alive. Lyra swayed on her feet, the silver light around her dimming. The runes on her skin were gone, leaving only faint, silvery scars. She felt hollowed out, utterly spent, but cleaner than she had ever been. The cage was gone. Kalen was at her side in an instant, catching her as her knees buckled. He held her up, his grip strong and steady. She looked up at him, her silver eyes clear, exhausted, and full of wonder. It remembered. "You helped it remember," Kalen said, his own voice thick with an emotion he couldn't name. He looked around at the transformed clearing, the glowing pool, the flowers growing where moments ago there had been only death. "You didn't just free the forest, Lyra. You healed it." Lyra leaned into his support, looking at the radiant heartwood. For the first time in her life, she felt a sense of belonging so profound it ached. This place was part of her, and she was part of it. "They won't stop," she murmured, the reality settling in. "The council, losing this place, it's a blow they cannot accept." "No," Kalen agreed, his gaze turning toward the south, toward the council's seat of power. "They will regroup. They will come with everything they have. Not for you, not for me, for this," he gestured to the renewed grove, "to reclaim their control." Lyra straightened, drawing strength from the land itself. The exhaustion was still there, but beneath it was a new foundation of steel. "Then we must ensure they cannot." She looked at Kalen, a plan already forming in her mind. "The Heartwood is awake. The old magic has returned. We are not just two people anymore, Kalen. We are a standard. It's time the other packs knew they have a choice." Kalen looked down at her, at the dirt and blood on her face, the silver scars on her skin, and the unbreakable light in her eyes. The girl from the circle of fire was gone. In her place stood a queen, crowned not with gold, but with living starlight and the allegiance of an ancient wood. "Then we must build an army," he said, a fierce pride warming his chest. Not of fear, but of faith. Above them, the woven branches of the silver trees parted, allowing a single beam of true moonlight to slice through the canopy and illuminate the cleansed pool. It was a blessing, a welcome. The battle for the Heartwood was won. The war for the soul of their world had just begun.
Connected to distant groves, how the old magic flowed in ley lines beneath the earth. It showed her the places where the council's corruption still festered like a sickness, ward stones that hummed with dissonance, springs that ran sluggish and dark. "The corruption is a system," she told Kalen one evening as they pored over maps in the keep. She pointed to several marked locations. The Heartwood was the heart of it, but the poison spread through these nodes. They are like locks on the land's spirit. To truly free the territories, we must break them all. Kalen studied the map, then her. "You were talking about not just one battle, but a campaign to liberate the land itself. The council's power is based on controlling that land, its fear, its magic. If we show the packs that the land can be free, that it can fight with them, the council's foundation crumbles." It was a revolutionary idea. Wars were fought for territory, for resources, for pride. This was a war for the very soul of the world.
Their growing alliance, which they began to call the Dawn Pact, was a fragile thing. Trust was in short supply after generations of council rule. The greatest test came with the arrival of Torin, alpha of the formidable isolationist Greyrock Pack. He was a mountain of a man, skeptical and blunt. He didn't come to pledge, he came to assess. He stood in the keep's hall, arms crossed, his gaze sweeping over the mix of warriors and healers. "You ask us to risk annihilation for a legend and a king who broke his word?" Torin rumbled, his eyes on Kaelin. "I broke a vow of neutrality that allowed tyranny to flourish. I now keep a vow to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Which is the greater honor?" Torin grunted, unmoved. He turned his sharp gaze to Lyra. "And you, First Blood, they say you talk to trees. What can you offer my people that the council cannot take away with fire and steel?" Lyra met his challenge calmly. She did not speak of armies or strategy. She walked to the window, pointing toward the distant dark line of the Whispering Woods. "Do you hear that, Alpha Torin?" The room fell silent. Everyone listened. There was only the wind. "Exactly," said Lyra softly. "For 100 years, the Whispering Woods groaned. Its pain was a noise you learned to ignore, a background hum of wrongness. Now it is silent. It is at peace. It is whole." She turned back to him, her silver eyes earnest. "I offer your people the chance to silence the groan in their own spirits, the chance to be whole, not to live in fear of the land, but to live with it. That is something no one can take away." Torin stared at her for a long, hard minute. He looked at the faces of the Sunfall warriors, fierce with new purpose. He looked at the Moore sisters, unashamed of their gifts. Finally, he let out a long breath. "My pack sits on the Stonefang ley line. The council's wardstone there, it makes the earth bitter. Our crops are weak. Our children are sickly. Can your magic fix that?" Lyra didn't hesitate. "Not my magic, the land's. And yes, together we can." Torin extended a calloused hand first to Kaelin, then to Lyra. "Then Greyrock stands with the Dawn Pact, but not for a king or a queen, for the land." It was their most significant victory yet. With Greyrock's strength, they were no longer a rebellion. They were a credible threat. But the council was not idle. Their response was not another army, but a poison of a different kind. Rumors began to circulate, carried by clever merchants and traveling bards. The rumors whispered that the First Blood heir was unstable, that her power was already twisting the Heartwood into something monstrous. They said Kaelin Stoneclaw was not a liberator, but a usurper, using the girl as a weapon to claim the entire North for himself. They spoke of the chaos she had brought, pointing to the displaced wildlife from the cleansed woods. Doubt, the council's oldest and sharpest weapon, began to seep into the alliance. A few smaller packs withdrew, citing internal matters. Supplies from sympathetic traders grew scarce. Lyra felt the doubt like a physical chill. She told Kaelin from frustration, "They are telling the story for us, and people are believing it." "We have the truth on our side," Kaelin said, though his jaw was tight. "Truth is a quiet voice," Lyra replied, gazing at the Heartwood. "Fear is a shout." She knew then that cleansing wardstones would not be enough. They had to win the story. They had to show the people, in a way they could not deny, the difference between the council's control and true freedom. An idea, daring and dangerous, came to her. The grandest of the council's corrupted nodes was not in some remote forest. It was in the heart of a bustling pack settlement, the milling town of Oakhaven. The wardstone there was the source of the Central Territory's obedience, a constant, subtle pulse that dampened strong wills and encouraged conformity. "We go to Oakhaven," Lyra announced at the next council of the pack's leaders. "We do not attack, we do not siege, we walk in daylight, and we free their stone." The room erupted in protest. "It's a trap! Suicide! They'll capture you and parade you as a prize." Kaelin was silent, his eyes on Lyra.
He saw the resolve there, the same resolve that had made her walk into the Whispering Woods. Why? He asked simply. Because everyone will be watching. If we do it in secret, the council will say we destroyed it. If we do it before the eyes of the people who live under its shadow, they will feel the difference. They will know the truth in their own hearts. No rumor can fight that. It was a gamble with the highest stakes. Their entire movement could be captured or crushed in a single day. Torrin of Greyrock finally slammed his fist on the table, quieting the room. "It's mad," he growled. Then a slow, fierce grin spread across his face. "But it's the kind of mad that changes history. Greyrock will cover your retreat." One by one, the other alphas nodded. The plan was set. As they prepared to leave, Kaelin found Lyra at the edge of the Heartwood. "You are not a weapon to be wielded," he told her, his voice low. "You are our heart. If this goes wrong—" "It must not go wrong," Lyra finished, touching the trunk of a silver tree. Its strength flowed into her. "This is the path, Kaelin, to show them that the cage has a door and that they can walk through it themselves." Under a shrouded moon, a small elite group, Kaelin, Lyra, Torrin, and a handful of the very best, slipped away from the mountains, heading toward the very center of the council's power. They were not an army marching to war. They were a surgical blade, aiming to cut out the heart of a lie. The storm was gathering, and they were walking straight into its eye. Oakhaven was not a fortress. It was a testament to quiet control. Its streets were clean, its markets orderly, its people polite and subdued. There was no laughter that rang too loud, no debate that grew too heated. An invisible blanket smothered the town, and its source was the great rune-covered obelisk in the central square, the Compliance Stone. Lyra felt its influence the moment they slipped into the town at dawn, disguised as wool traders. It was a dull pressure behind her eyes, a whisper to sit down, be quiet, don't make trouble. For someone whose spirit had just learned to fly, it was suffocating. Kaelin walked beside her, his presence a solid anchor against the psychic fog. Kaelin, Torrin, and the others fanned out, blending into the growing market day crowd, ready to cause distractions. Their plan was simple in theory, impossible in practice. Reach the stone, and with the whole town watching, Lyra would cleanse it as she had the Heartwood. The square was busy. Council guards in crow feather cloaks patrolled lazily, confident in the stone's power. The obelisk itself was black granite, covered in the now familiar sickly green runes. People gave it a wide berth, their eyes sliding away from it, as if it hurt to look directly at it. Lyra's heart hammered against her ribs. This was not a sacred grove. It was a public cage. The magic here was not wounded and waiting for healing. It was arrogant and entrenched. She took a steadying breath and stepped out from the cover of a baker's stall. She walked directly toward the Compliance Stone. A few people glanced at her, then quickly away. A guard frowned, his hand moving to his weapon. The pressure increased, a mental hand pushing her back. She kept walking. When she was 10 paces from the stone, the guard stepped into her path. "Halt! No loitering near the stone." Lyra looked past him at the obelisk. She raised her voice, clear and strong, cutting through the market murmur. "People of Oakhaven, do you ever wonder why your dreams feel faint? Why your anger dies before it can become action? Why your songs all sound the same?" The square began to fall silent. Stalls stopped. People turned, shock on their faces. No one addressed the crowd. No one questioned. The guard grabbed her arm. "That's enough. Let her speak." The voice was Kaelin's. He had shed his trader's cloak, standing in his full, imposing stature. Recognition dawned on some faces, the neutral king from the rumors. A second guard blew a sharp whistle. More guards converged. Torrin's voice boomed from the other side of the square. "Fire! The granary is on fire!" Panic and confusion erupted as people turned, looking for smoke. In the moment of distraction, Kaelin moved, disarming the guard holding Lyra with a fluid motion and shoving him back gently but firmly. He created a space around her and the stone.
Lyra didn't waste it. She placed both hands on the cold, black granite. The corruption here was different. It was slick and smug, woven with the fears and resigned compliance of generations. It whispered to her, "Why fight? Peace is here. Order is here. Be still." "Your peace is a prison," Lyra hissed through her gritted teeth. She reached not for her anger, but for her compassion, for these people living in a half-sleep. She reached for the memory of the heartwood's joy upon being freed. She let her silver light flow into the stone. The reaction was violent. The green runes blazed, fighting back. A wave of intense, compulsive magic burst from the obelisk, washing over the square. People cried out, clutching their heads, some dropping to their knees under the amplified command to obey. Lyra staggered, the mental assault fierce. She felt the council's will, vast and cold, pressing down through the stone. "It's a focal point," Kaelin yelled, fighting off two guards who were shaking off the compulsion. "They're fighting you through it." Lyra understood. She wasn't just cleansing a stone. She was in a direct tug of war with the collective magic of the council channeled through this node. Her power, though pure, was new and untested against such a concentrated force. She was losing. The green light began to overpower her silver. Despair clawed at her heart. If she failed here, in front of everyone, it would prove every council rumor true. She was weak. She was a disruption. Then she felt it, a tiny trickle of something else. Not her power, not the council's. It was faint, a mere whisper from the cobblestones beneath her, from the foundations of the buildings. It was the land of Oakhaven, buried deep under layers of control, a memory of free-flowing streams, of wild orchards, of unscripted laughter. The land was rooting for her. "You are not alone," it seemed to sigh. New strength, borrowed from the very earth she was trying to save, surged through her. Her silver light flared, bright and blinding. She wasn't just pushing her power in, she was connecting the stone to the latent, untouched earth magic below the town, giving it a new pathway, a way home. The black granite cracked. A web of fissures spread from her hands, and with a sound like a giant bell ringing, the compliance stone shattered from the inside out. The explosion of magic was not destructive, but liberating. The shards of stone fell as harmless gray dust. The compulsion vanished, replaced by a pure, clean energy that washed through the square, through the town, like a fresh wind after a long stagnation. The silence was absolute. Then a child laughed, a bright, unfettered sound of pure joy. A woman gasped, touching her own cheek as if feeling it for the first time. An old man looked at his hands, then at the sky, tears streaming down his face. The council guards stood confused, their connection to their authority momentarily severed. They looked at the pile of dust where their stone had stood, then at the transformed faces of the people around them, and they knew their rule here was over. Lyra swayed, utterly drained. Kaelin caught her, holding her upright. She looked out at the crowd, at their awestruck, awakening faces. "The cage is open," she said, her voice carried by the strange new quiet. She didn't need to say more. The truth was felt, not heard. As Kaelin and Torin helped her from the square, no one tried to stop them. The people of Oakhaven were too busy rediscovering the sound of their own thoughts, the feel of their own unburdened spirits. The mission was a spectacular success, but as they fled Oakhaven, a new rumor, born of truth this time, would spread ahead of them. The First Blood heir did not bring chaos, she brought back something stolen long ago: choice. And from the high towers of the council's citadel, a new order was given. No more captures, no more subtleties. The two leaders of the Dawn Pact were to be eliminated by any means necessary. The game had changed. The war was now truly and irrevocably personal. The victory at Oakhaven was a flame that lit the north. Reports flooded in. Wardstones in other towns spontaneously cracked. Pacts long thought loyal to the council declared for the Dawn Pact. The council's control was unraveling, and in their panic, they grew reckless. Their retaliation was not a focused army, but a scourge. They unleashed the Shadowfen wolves, feral, mindless beasts they had magically twisted and kept caged for generations, sending them in rabid packs to ravage the territories that had sided with Kaelin and Lyra. It was a strategy of terror, designed to show that rebellion led only to blood and loss. The Dawn Pact scrambled to defend their new allies. Kaelin, Lyra, and their forces became a mobile shield, racing from village to village, fighting off the Fenwolves. It was draining, defensive warfare. They were saving lives, but they were reacting, not acting. The council was forcing them to dance to a bloody tune. "We are putting out fires while they still hold the torch," Kaelin growled one night in a makeshift camp after driving off another Fen pack from a shepherd's valley. He looked weary, a new scar over his brow. "We must strike at the hand that holds it." Lyra, who had been healing a wounded warrior with a touch that now glowed with gentle silver light, looked up. The Citadel. The council's seat of power, Ravenspire, was a mountain fortress considered impregnable. Attacking it head-on was suicide. "Not an attack," Kaelin said, his violet eyes hardening with a plan born of desperation. "A decapitation. A small team, in and out. We target the council's source of power, the Black Vault where they store the original suppression artifacts, the ones they use to corrupt the land. Destroy that, and their ability to command the Fenwolves, to reinforce the Wardstones, it all collapses." Lyra felt a chill. "It's the most heavily guarded place in the world." "Which is why they won't expect it," Torrin said, leaning forward. He had lost 2 of his own to the Fenwolves. His grief had crystallized into a cold fury. "We think we're scattered, putting out their fires. They won't expect us to walk into the heart of the inferno." Lyra looked from Kaelin's determined face to Torrin's grim one. She knew this was the turning point. A defensive war would bleed them dry. A strike at the source could end it. But the risk? "I'll go. Alone. My speed, my power. I have the best chance of getting in unseen." "No," Lyra said immediately, a surge of protective fear startling her with its intensity. "My bloodline is the key to breaking their artifacts. I have to go." A fierce argument erupted, not of strategy, but of protection. Each was willing to be the shield for the other. In the end, a compromise was forged. They would go together, with Torrin and 3 of his most stealthy Greyrock scouts as their rear guard. A team of 6 against a mountain. The journey to Ravenspire was a tense, shadowed thing. They moved like ghosts, avoiding all paths. The land here felt sicker, older in its misery. The very rocks seemed to watch them with malice. They breached the outer defenses using a forgotten drainage tunnel Torrin's scouts had found on an old smuggler's map. The inside of the mountain was a maze of torchlit corridors, echoing with the distant clank of armor and the low chant of unseen rituals. The air grew colder and heavier as they descended toward the vault. The pull of dark magic was a physical nausea. Lyra's silver scars tingled painfully. They found the black vault door at the end of a long deserted corridor. It was made of a single sheet of obsidian, etched with runes that moved like trapped insects. No guard stood before it. The magic was the guard. "This is it," Kaelin whispered. "Lyra, can you feel it?" She could. Behind that door was a concentration of such wrongness it made her soul weep. But within that wrongness, she could also feel faint, desperate pulses, the fading heartbeats of the captured land magic, the stolen spirits of places like the Heartwood. She nodded, steeling herself. "I can break it, but it will be loud. It will bring every guard in the mountain down on us." Kaelin placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then you break it. We will hold the door." Torin and the scouts took up positions, weapons ready, faces set in lines of absolute resolve. This was their stand. Lyra placed her hands on the cold obsidian. The runes flared, trying to repel her, to poison her mind with images of despair. She sank into the connection with the land, drawing strength not from the dead mountain around her, but from the memory of the free Heartwood, the cleansed pool, the laughing child in Oakhaven. She poured that memory of freedom into the door. It began to hum, then vibrate. Cracks of silver light spread across its surface. The chanting elsewhere in the mountain faltered, then turned to shouts of alarm. With a deafening crack, the obsidian door shattered inward. The black vault was not a room of treasures, but a tomb. On black stone pedestals sat objects of profound sorrow, a twisted root from the heartwood, a crystal vial of water from a sacred spring, the skull of the first alpha who had defied them. Each was wrapped in chains of green magic. The keystone artifact pulsed in the center, a jagged black crystal that seemed to drink the light. The source. Lyra moved towards it, her hand outstretched. That's when the trap was sprung. The walls of the vault shimmered, not guards, but the three high seers themselves, including the one from the Heartwood, stepped out of seeming solid stone. They had been waiting. The attack on the outlying territories, the Fenwolves, it had all been bait to draw the most dangerous pieces off the board. First blood, the lead seer hissed, and the Oathbreaker King, you deliver yourselves.
The seers attacked not with physical force, but with concentrated waves of suppression magic, aimed straight at Lyra. It was the power that had caged her for years, magnified 100-fold. Lyra cried out, falling to her knees as the familiar, agonizing feeling of being smothered, erased, collapsed in on her. Her silver light sputtered. Kaelin roared, shifting instantly and surging toward the seers, but their magic formed a barrier around them, a wall of pure anti-will that burned to touch. He was thrown back, slamming into a pedestal. Torin and the scouts fired arrows, swung axes, but their weapons passed through the seers as if through smoke. This was a battle of spirit, not flesh. Lyra fought, but she was drowning. The vault's darkness fed the seer's power. She was losing. The crystal in the center pulsed victoriously. Kaelin saw her light dying. He saw the triumphant gleam in the lead seer's eye. He remembered the feel of her laugh in the storm, the sight of her healing the land, the sound of her voice offering choice. He made his decision. He shifted back to human form. He did not attack the barrier again. Instead, he turned his own formidable alpha power inward, not to strengthen himself, but to forge it into a single, brilliant point of pure, defiant will. A will that had ruled a kingdom, that had broken neutrality for justice, that had chosen to stand beside a queen. He stepped between Lyra and the seers. He looked at the lead seer, and he smiled. "You think your magic cages wills?" Kaelin's voice echoed in the chamber, strong and clear. "Then try to cage mine." He unleashed the concentrated force of his spirit not as an attack, but as a sacrifice. He poured every ounce of his dominance, his authority, his kinghood into the seer's suppression field. It was like pouring light into a black hole. The field, designed to break weaker wills, was overloaded by the sheer, undiluted force of a true Alpha King's unconquerable spirit. The seers screamed, not in triumph, but in shock and pain as their own spell turned on them, fed by Kaelin's power. The barrier flickered, distorted, and began to consume itself. But the cost was immense. Kaelin fell to his knees, his form shuddering. The light in his violet eyes dimmed. He was breaking his own spirit to shatter their cage. "Kaelin!" Lyra's scream was raw. The distraction, the cataclysmic clash of wills was what she needed. The suppression on her broke for a single, crucial second.
Her silver eyes blazed with fury, with grief, with love. She didn't reach for the black crystal. She reached for Kalen, for the brilliant, selfless power he was unleashing. She wrapped her own first blood magic around his, not to stop it, but to guide it, to focus it. Together, their combined will, a king's sacrifice and a queen's rage, lanced across the room and struck the black crystal. It did not shatter. It dissolved into nothingness, a silent negation of its own existence. The chain of green magic connecting every artifact in the room snapped. The stolen objects on the pedestals crumbled to dust, their essence sighing out in a wave of release that washed the vault clean. The three high seers wailed, their connection to their source of power severed. Their forms flickered and faded, not dead, but unmade, their spirits scattered on the backblast of their own broken magic. Silence. Lyra crawled to Kalen. He was pale, his breathing shallow, his eyes closed. He had poured too much of himself out. "No, no, no," she whispered, cradling his head, her tears falling on his face. Her healing light flowed into him, but it met a terrifying emptiness. He had given his essence. "The king," Torin breathed, his voice thick with horror. Alarms were blaring throughout Ravenspire. The mountain itself seemed to shudder in outrage. "We have to move," one of the scouts urged. Lyra looked down at Kalen's still face, then at the empty pedestal. The source was gone. The war was won. But at what cost? She made her voice a command, laced with all the authority of the First Blood. "Help me to carry him. We are leaving now." As they fled the crumbling heart of the council's power, Lyra made a vow not to the land, but to the man in her arms. "You showed me how to be free. Now I will show you how to come back." The king made his sacrifice. The queen would move heaven and earth to repay it. The escape from Ravenspire was a blur of adrenaline and dread. Torin and the scouts formed a shell around Lyra as she half-carried, half-dragged Kalen's non-responsive form through the chaotic corridors. The mountain was in an uproar, its masters broken, its magic unraveling. They used the confusion, retracing their path through the drainage tunnel and vanishing into the night-shrouded hills. They did not stop until they were deep within a sheltered pine grove, far from any path. Kalen had not stirred. His skin was cool, his heartbeat a faint drum against the immense silence within him. Lyra laid him on a bed of soft needles and fell to her knees beside him. The others stood back, giving her space, their faces grim. They had won the war, but the look in Lyra's silver eyes told them the greatest battle had just begun. She placed her hands on his chest, over his heart. She closed her eyes and reached for her power, for the gentle, healing light she had used on others. She poured it into him. It flowed, but it was like water poured into a bottomless vessel. It vanished into the emptiness he had carved within himself. "It's not working," she said, her voice trembling. Torin knelt on his other side. "He didn't just spend his strength, Lyra. He spent his spark. The thing that makes an Alpha King more than just a strong wolf. He gave his self." Lyra refused to accept it. "No, he can't. The land is free because of him. I am free because of him." A sob caught in her throat. "He doesn't get to leave now." She tried again, pushing harder. Silver light enveloped them both, but Kalen remained a shadow in the brilliance. Exhausted, mentally and physically shattered, Lyra finally slumped. The grief was a physical weight. She had found her purpose, her power, her place beside him. To lose him now felt like the universe's cruelest joke. As despair threatened to swallow her, she felt a gentle nudge against her senses. Not from Kalen, from the earth beneath them. The pine grove, ordinary and untouched by great magic, was humming softly. It was offering its own feeble, persistent life force. It was the land, the very thing they had fought for, trying to give back. An idea, fragile as a spider's thread, formed in her mind. Kaelin had tied his spirit to the land when he became king. His strength was the mountain's strength. His peace was his people's peace. He wasn't just a man, he was the heart of a territory. What if he couldn't be healed by one person? What if he needed to be remembered by the whole land? Torin, she said, her voice gaining a new steadiness. We need to get him to the Heartwood. It's the most alive place in the world now. It's the soul of the free land. If anything can rekindle his spark, it's there. It was a long, perilous journey with an unconscious king. They fashioned a litter, moving only at night, avoiding all contact. News traveled faster than they did. They heard whispers from hidden travelers. The council had collapsed. The high seers were gone. Packs were tearing down wardstones themselves. The name Stoneclaw was spoken with reverence, and Lyra of the First Dawn with awe. But they also heard the fearful question, where is the king? When they finally stumbled into the clearing of the Heartwood, it was like coming home. The silver trees glowed warmly in the starlight. The pools shone like liquid moonstone. The air thrummed with a vibrant, peaceful power. Lyra had them place Kaelin beside the pool. She dismissed Torin and the scouts to rest, to guard the perimeter. She needed to do this alone. She sat beside Kaelin, taking his cold hand in hers. She didn't try to push her power into him again. Instead, she opened herself completely. She opened the bond that had been growing between them, the bond of shared purpose, of respect, of unspoken devotion. She opened her connection to the Heartwood, and through it, to the whispering network of the newly freed land. And then, she began to speak, not with magic, but with words. Her voice was soft, waving through the silent grove. The land remembers you, Kaelin Stoneclaw. It remembers the king who was just, who was neutral not out of coldness, but out of a desire for peace. She spoke of his strength, his loyalty, his sacrifice. She spoke of the Sunfall Valley, still safe, of Oakhaven, where laughter now rang true, of the broken chains in the Black Vault. She was not calling his spirit back. She was painting a picture of it for the world to see, reminding the land of the king it had lost. As she spoke, something began to happen. Tiny points of light, like will-o-wisps, began to rise from the Heartwood pool. They were not of Lyra's making. They drifted toward Kaelin, settling on his skin like gentle kisses. Then, from the trees themselves, soft silver leaves detached and floated down, covering him like a blanket. The Heartwood was answering. It was gathering the echoes of gratitude, the whispers of peace from every freed stone, every unburdened pack, every stream that now ran clear. It was collecting the thanks of the land itself. Lyra continued her vigil, her story becoming a song, a lullaby of remembrance. She sang of the first time she saw him, a giant in the storm. She sang of his hand pulling her from the darkness, of his belief when she had none, of the way he knelt not in submission, but in acknowledgement of who she was. Hours passed. The silver leaves covered Kaelin completely, forming a luminous cocoon. Lyra's voice grew hoarse, but she did not stop. She poured every memory, every feeling, every shred of hope into her song. As the first hint of dawn tinged the sky, the cocoon of leaves began to glow from within. The light pulsed, gently, in time with Lyra's heartbeat. She fell silent, holding her breath. The leaves stirred, then slowly they fell away, dissolving into motes of light. Kaelin lay as he had, but color had returned to his skin. His chest rose and fell in a deep, steady rhythm, and then his eyelids fluttered. His violet eyes opened. They were clear. They were weary, but they were his. They focused on Lyra's tear-streaked face. For a long moment, he just looked at her, as if remembering not just her, but everything. A slow, gentle smile touched his lips, weak but undeniable. Lyra, he breathed, her name a sigh of homecoming. A sob of pure, undiluted joy escaped her. She didn't throw herself at him. She simply clasped his hand tighter, tears flowing freely. You came back. I heard a queen calling. It was the most beautiful sound. I had to follow it. He tried to sit up, and she helped him. He looked around at the heartwood, at the evidence of its love covering the ground around them, and he understood. The land. The land remembered its king, Lyra said, smiling through her tears, and it wanted you to stay. Kaelin looked at Lyra, his gaze deepening. He saw the exhaustion, the fear, the unwavering love in her eyes. He lifted a hand, slowly, and brushed a tear from her cheek. The touch was simple, but it carried the weight of everything they had survived. "I am here," he said, a promise, "not because of the land, because of you." In the dawning light, in the heart of the forest they had saved, the king had returned, the war was over, and a new day for both of them, and for all their world, had finally begun. Kaelin's recovery was not swift. The spark had been rekindled, but the flame burned low. For days, he rested in the Heartwood clearing, tended by Lyra and the silent, healing magic of the place. Strength returned to his limbs slowly, like sap rising in spring. The deep weariness in his spirit, however, took longer to mend. He watched Lyra. He saw how she moved with a new quiet authority among the warriors and healers who now congregated at the edge of the sacred grove, which had become the de facto capital of the free territories. She listened to disputes over hunting grounds with patience, mediated grievances with startling fairness, and when a frightened scout brought news of a last rogue band of Shadowfen wolves, she did not flinch. She simply asked for a map, pointed to a narrow pass, and said, "Guide them there. The rock slides have been unrestless. The land will finish what we started."
And it did. The land, it seemed, was eager to protect its guardians. She was a queen in all but name, and the people saw it. They called her Lyra of the First Dawn, and the title fit her like sunlight. One afternoon, as Kaelin managed to walk the perimeter of the clearing without aid, Grandmother Hulda arrived. The elder, who had spoken the truth at the standoff with the council, was escorted by representatives from every major pack and territory. They formed a solemn circle in the clearing, their faces etched with the relief and uncertainty of a new world. Hulda's old eyes took in Kaelin, still leaning slightly on a staff of silverwood, and Lyra standing straight beside him. She nodded, as if satisfied. "The council is dust," Hulda announced, her voice carrying. "Its citadel is silent. Its laws are broken. But nature abhors a vacuum, and so do people. We have peace won by sacrifice and blood, but we do not yet have order. We have freedom, but we do not yet have unity." She looked directly at them. "The North does not need another council. It needs a foundation. It needs a reminder of what we fought for." She held out her gnarled hands. "We, the gathered voices of the free packs, have come to ask, no, to urge. King Kaelin Stoneclaw, will you take up your crown not just for the northern reaches, but for all who seek shelter under the law of justice, not fear?" Kaelin looked around the circle. He saw Torin of Greyrock, who gave a firm nod. He saw the Alpha of Sunfall, the sisters from the Moors, faces from Oakhaven, and many he did not know. He saw hope, fragile and bright in their eyes. He had never wanted an empire, but he understood duty. "I will," he said, his voice still soft but resonant with returning strength. But not alone. He turned to Lyra. The war was not won by a king. It was won by the queen, by the heart of the land itself standing up and saying, "No more. Any crown I wear is hollow if it does not sit beside hers." All eyes turned to Lyra. She had not expected this. She had fought for freedom, for the land, for him, not for a throne. "Lyra of the First Dawn," Hulda said, her voice gentler. "Your blood is the oldest memory we have. You did not seek power. Power sought you to break its chains. Will you use that legacy? Will you stand as our guide, not our ruler, as the keeper of the bond between wolf and wood, between pack and land? Will you be our Alpha Queen?"
Lyra felt the weight of the request. She looked at Kaelin, seeing the absolute trust and support in his eyes. She looked at the heartwood trees, which seemed to lean in, listening. She thought of the silent, grateful land offering its energy to save him. This was not about commanding, it was about serving in a new way. "I will," she said, her silver eyes clear. "But my oath is not to power. It is to the truth we fought for. I will be a voice for the land, and for any wolf who has been told they are less. The crown," she added, looking at the expectant faces, "will be a reminder of that promise, not a weight to bend our necks." A murmur of approval, deep and heartfelt, rippled through the gathering. The coronation was set for the next full moon. It was not to be a grand affair of gold and pomp, but a ceremony of earth and essence. Word spread, and wolves journeyed from every corner of the north to witness it. On the appointed night, the Heartwood clearing was filled with a silent, reverent crowd. Torches of scented wood burned, their smoke carrying prayers. The moon hung full and silver overhead, bathing everything in its glow. Grandmother Hulda stood before the moonlit pool. She held no metal circlet. In her hands were 2 woven crowns. One was made of dark, sturdy pine branches from Kaelin's mountain, intertwined with strands of iron ore. The other was woven from the supple silver vines of the heartwood, studded with living starflowers that glowed with their own soft light. "Kaelin Stoneclaw," Hulda called. "Step forward." Kaelin did. He wore simple gray clothes, his posture regal without pretense. Hulda placed the crown of pine and iron on his head. "With the strength of the mountain and the resilience of stone, we crown you High King of the Free Territories. May your rule be steadfast, your judgments fair, and your heart remember the cost of peace." Then Hulda turned. "Lyra of the First Dawn, step forward." Lyra approached. She wore a simple dress the color of twilight. Hulda placed the silver vine crown on her dark hair. "With the grace of the moon and the enduring life of the wood, we crown you Alpha Queen. May your spirit be a bridge, your wisdom a guide, and your presence a reminder that we are all children of the same earth." Hulda took a step back and bowed her head. The entire gathering followed suit, a wave of respect flowing through the clearing. Kaelin and Lyra turned to face their people. For a moment, they were just 2 figures under the moon, crowned with the very essence of their home. Then Kaelin spoke, his voice carrying to the furthest listener. "We do not promise you an easy future. We promise you a free one. Your laws will be your own, made in your own councils. Our throne will be a place of appeal, of unity, of protection, never of coercion." Lyra added, her voice like a clear bell, "And I will promise to listen, to the wind in the pines, to the water over stone, and to the quietest voice in the smallest pack. The land has a voice. You have a voice. This new dawn is for hearing them both." They did not clasp hands or make a grand gesture. They simply stood side by side, crowned in wood and vine, and the rightness of it was so profound it needed no fanfare. The silence broke into a sound that was not a cheer, but a unified, harmonious howl, a song of belonging that rose from hundreds of throats, weaving with the wind through the silver trees and up to the moon itself. It was the sound of a people coming home. After the ceremony, as the clearing slowly emptied and celebrations began in respectful camps beyond the trees, Kaelin and Lyra found a moment alone by the pool. "It feels different," Lyra said, touching the delicate vine crown. "Because it is not a cage," Kaelin said, looking at his own simple crown. "It is a promise we made together, to them, and to each other." He turned to her, the moonlight etching his features in silver and shadow. "Lyra," he began, his voice dropping to an intimate tone. "When I was gone, in that emptiness, the only thread I could find was you, your voice. It was the only map I had back to the world." Lyra's heart swelled. "And you are my strength, the reason I found the courage to use my voice at all." She looked at the pool, then back at him. "We did not choose this path, Kaelin. It was forced upon us. But we chose to walk it together, and I would choose it again, every time." He reached out then, and with a tenderness that spoke volumes, he took her hand, not in possession, but in partnership. His fingers laced with hers, a simple, profound connection. It was their first real, intentional touch that was not about healing or rescue. It was about choice, about them.
"Together," he agreed, his violet eyes holding hers, "for as long as this new dawn lasts." In the quiet of the heartwood, under the witness of the moon and the ancient trees, the king and queen stood hand in hand, their crowns of earth and vine a testament to a love that had been forged in storm and sacrifice and was now blooming in the gentle light of peace. The seasons turned. The new order, built on the foundation of the Dawn Pact, did not bring a perfect utopia. There were still disagreements between pacts, border disputes, and the long, hard work of healing lands scarred by the Council's corruption. But the fear was gone. The silent, choking pressure of control had lifted. Kaelin and Lyra ruled from a new hall built not as a fortress, but as a gathering place at the edge of the Heartwood. Its walls were living trees, its roof a canopy of intertwined branches. It was open, airy, and alive. They held court under the sun, listening to petitions, advising, mediating. Their authority came from respect, earned daily. Lyra's days were often spent traveling. She became the Queen's Road, a circuit of visitation to every territory. She didn't go to inspect or tax, she went to listen. She would sit with elders, walk with hunters, kneel with children by sickly streams, her hands in the water until it ran clear again. She taught, softly, how to hear the land's needs, where to hunt lightly, where to let the earth rest, which groves were sacred and why. The title, Keeper of the Bond, became her true name. Kaelin was the anchor. He rebuilt the laws, focusing on justice and restitution rather than punishment. He trained a new guard not for conquest, but for protection of the weak and the preservation of the hard-won peace. His strength, once a weapon of war, became the unshakable pillar upon which the new peace rested. One evening, a full year after the coronation, they walked together through the Silverwood, the new name for the reclaimed Whispering Woods. The path was dappled with setting sunlight. "The emissary from the southern clans arrives tomorrow. They've heard the stories. They want to discuss trade treaties, as equals." Lyra smiled. "Word of free land and fair kings travels fast." She paused, watching a family of deer graze without fear nearby. "Do you ever miss it? The silence of your old keep, the simplicity of neutrality?" Kaelin stopped walking, looking at her. "Not for a single moment," he said with utter certainty. "Neutrality was a prison of my own making, built from old pain. This," he gestured to the vibrant woods, the distant sound of a blacksmith's hammer from a nearby settlement, "this is not simple. It is messy and demanding and beautiful. It is life, and I have it because I followed a scream in a storm." Lyra's smile deepened. They continued to a familiar place, a small, sunny bluff overlooking the Silverwood and the mountains beyond. It had become their private retreat. "I received a message today," Lyra said, her tone shifting slightly, "from Oakhaven, the school we helped them build. They've named it the Stone Claw Hall, for the king who gave them back their will." She looked at him. "And the main courtyard is the Lyra Garden, for the queen who taught them to listen to the flowers." Kaelin chuckled, a warm, rich sound. "They honor us."
They honor what we built together, she corrected softly. She turned to face him, the golden light of sunset setting her silver crown aglow. Kalen, when I was in that circle, I believed my life was over. I believed I was a mistake the world was correcting. I had nothing, no hope, no future. She reached out, taking both of his hands in hers. You gave me everything, a purpose, a home, a a love for this world and the people in it I never dreamed I could have. Her silver eyes shone with unshed tears of pure joy. You didn't just save my life that night. You showed me how to live it. Kaylin brought her hands to his lips, pressing a gentle, reverent kiss to her knuckles. It was a gesture of deep devotion, pure and heartfelt. Kaylin, his voice thick with emotion, you have it backwards. You were the light in my century of darkness. You were the reason my heart started beating again. You are not a queen beside me. You are the queen of me. My heart, my soul, my everything. He released her hands only to cup her face, his thumbs brushing away the happy tears that escaped. I love you, Lyra of the First Dawn, my king, my protector, my partner, my home. Lyra's heart felt too full for her chest. She leaned her forehead against his, a gesture of ultimate trust and closeness. And I love you, Kaylin Stoneclaw, my king, my protector, my partner, my home. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in the sunset and the absolute certainty of their bond. It was a love story written not in grand ballrooms, but in storm-soaked forests and moonlit groves, a love built on seeing the true, unbreakable spirit in the other and choosing to stand by it, no matter the cost. As the first stars appeared, they walked back toward the living hall, hand in hand. The path was lit by softly glowing lanterns, crystals charged by Lyra's touch that absorbed sunlight and gave it back at dusk. At the edge of the Heartwood clearing, they paused. Before them, their home was warm and inviting. Around them, the free land slept peacefully. Above them, a sky full of promises stretched out forever. They left me behind to die in the evil forest, Lyra whispered, not with pain but with wonder, squeezing Kaylin's hand. Kaylin looked down at her, his violet eyes full of a love as deep and eternal as the mountains. But the forest did not take you, he finished, his voice a soft rumble in the twilight. It gave you to me, and together we made the world new. He kissed her then under the starlight. It was their first kiss, a gentle, tender meeting of lips that held a lifetime of storms weathered and dawns welcomed. It was a seal on their promise, a celebration of their journey, and a perfect beginning to everything that would come after. In the living hall, the hearth fire burned bright. In the territories, wolves slept safely in their dens. And in the heartwood, the ancient trees stood watch, their roots deep in healthy earth, their branches reaching toward a sky no longer shadowed by fear. The girl who had been a sacrifice was now a queen, crowned in living vine. The king who had been neutral was now a legend, crowned in mountain stone. And their love, born in defiance and nurtured in sacrifice, was the strongest magic of all, the magic that built a new world, one dawn at a time. Together, they ruled not with an iron fist, but with open hands, and their reign, born from a scream in a storm, was called the Eternal Dawn, and it was, indeed, a very happy beginning. The end.